What's quack-a-lackin'? I am at McKennan Park on the south side of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and today's video is going to be the McKennan Park Historic District, which circles this park. This is the very first park ever created in Sioux Falls, and both this park and the neighborhood that surrounds it have a shared overlapping history that I'm going to tell you all about today. We're going to look at some beautiful homes, and I just want to say thank you once again to Chauncey for asking for this video, because I've been meaning to make this for a long time, and I appreciate your suggestion, giving me a reason to do so. So having said that, let's get to it. The McKennan Historic District. Let's go. This park was founded in 1906. It was the very first park in the city of Sioux Falls. Both the park and the historic neighborhood that surround it are named after the same lady, Miss Helen McKennan, who was a pioneer, a philanthropist, a real estate speculator, and a lady who was one of the wealthiest citizens of this town at the end of the 19th century. We'll definitely come back and explore this park in more detail later, but today we want to really focus on the neighborhood around this park, because it has an incredible history that I really want to share with you, and also take a look at some of these amazing homes. If you think back to when we took a tour of the Cathedral Historic District, I told you that that was the first neighborhood in town, and that the homes in that neighborhood were constructed from the 1870s up until 1925. And this neighborhood came a little bit later. Most of the homes in the McKennan Historic District date from around 1915 up until about 1935, so very early 20th century. Not quite as old as the Cathedral Historic District, but there's still some amazing old homes in this neighborhood that feature a variety of architectural styles. And again, just quick disclaimer, I am in no way an expert on architecture. I know very little, but I will share what I do know about each one of these homes. And if you know anything additional, then please feel free to educate me. But it's an absolute beautiful neighborhood. It's probably my favorite neighborhood in town, and I'm really happy to have an opportunity to show it to you today. Give you just a quick look of the scenery as I walk down towards the starting point of today's tour. I do have a map, and I have plotted a course on that map that I think is going to show us the most incredible homes. I have researched a little bit about each one of these homes, so I can tell you a tiny bit about each one and the people who constructed them. And yeah, I think it's going to be a nice day today. The temperature is about 88 degrees, which is hot, but this neighborhood is really known for its trees. So there's lots of shade from the trees. The wind is blowing at about a steady 5 to 8 miles an hour, and the weather just feels absolutely beautiful. It's a nice day to be outside. Anyway, This neighborhood was originally known as the Boulevard development, because this street that we are walking down to, which today is 21st Street in Sioux Falls, was originally known as the Boulevard. Not something another boulevard, but the Boulevard. So this was the Boulevard development, or the Boulevard district in those days. And it was about the third neighborhood to come around, because originally you had everything really centrally clustered to the downtown area. So you had the downtown area, which was very concentrated, and then you had Nob Hill up above downtown, which is today the Cathedral Historic District, and then you had the All Saints neighborhood. So at the time that this place really became up and going, really Nob Hill and All Saints or downtown were the only options. And as the city began to get a population into the thousands and needed to expand outward, this was the area that they expanded to. And originally, it didn't catch on. This neighborhood was first platted in 1883 by a guy named Colonel Melvin Grigsby. And Colonel Grigsby plotted this whole neighborhood, planned the streets, plotted out the home additions, and had it all set to go in 1883. But as I said, most of the homes in this neighborhood were not constructed until 1915 to 1935. So it did take a little time for things to catch on. But when they did catch on, this became one of the most desirable areas in town to live. In fact, to this day in the 21st century, most of the homes in this neighborhood are passed down generationally from one generation to the next, and they stay in these families because this is a highly sought after neighborhood that is very difficult to get in, even today, 120 years later. We're starting today's tour of the McKennan Park Historic District on the corner of 21st and 5th Street. Again, 21st was known as the Boulevard, and at 601 21st is this Tudor Revival style cottage. This home was built by a man named Thomas Townley in 1926, and Mr. Townley was a traveling salesman. I was able to uncover that much. I'm not sure exactly what he sold, but he was a traveling salesman, and he constructed this home in 1926 for himself and his wife. And one interesting thing I find that more recent inhabitants have done is look at the trampoline. They have dug out a pit underneath the trampoline so that it can be at ground level instead of elevated. I've never seen this at someone's home before. If you have, shout out and let me know. But the next home we're going to look at is directly across the street. This home right here. So give me a chance to transit the street, and I'll tell you about this home in just a moment. I wish I knew more about this cottage and the year it was built, but it's very cute. It's beautiful. I love the leaded glass on the side window, if you can pick that up on camera. And I wish I knew more about it, but it is directly next door to the next home on the tour. And I don't know a lot about this home. I do know three things, however. One is it is incredibly large. This is a fantastically huge home. And the other things that I know is that it is a Georgia Revival style home, and that it was constructed by a man named Walter Stevens in 1919. And wow, Mr. Stevens must have had an incredible amount of money to build a house this large in 1919. Now, the next house is just right next door on the corner, but while I walk down to it, I want to continue to tell you a little bit more about Helen McKennan, because the story of this neighborhood is really her story, but unfortunately, that story begins at the time of her passing, so she never lived to see just how well loved and respected that she was. But I told you that Colonel Grigsby had platted this land in 1883, and at some point after that, Miss McKennan became a partner in the Boulevard development with Mr. Grigsby, and so she was really instrumental in its development. She was one of the first inhabitants in this neighborhood, and you have to consider that in those days, while today this is just an ordinary neighborhood on the south side of Sioux Falls, but it's just a part of town, in those days this was outside of town. It was considered a rural setting that was difficult to get to, and that's part of what made it so hard to take off during the first few decades. And so Miss McKennan was one of the first people to move into this neighborhood before it became popular. And at those times, it was all grassland, and people like Miss McKennan, who were the first ones, they were really the wealthy citizens who also had homes over in Nob Hill. And I think that you can maybe relate to this because in today's world, we have what we call snowbirds who will live in their regular homes up in the northern states during the summer months when the weather is nice. But when wintertime rolls around and things get a little bit cold, they go down to Florida for the winter months. And so they have a summer home and a winter home. And in those days, it was kind of the same thing, only instead of going to a different part of the country, your summer home was more out in the country, outside of town, so that you could camp and fish and enjoy the outdoors. And then when wintertime came, you would move to your winter home, which was like really clustered into the downtown area, so that everything that you needed was within a short walking distance, and you could really hunker down for the cold winter months. So they had summer and winter homes just differently than we do. And this development was initially where the wealthiest people's summer homes were located. So that's really how it got its start. Still on the corner of 5th and 21st, this home was constructed in 1931 by a local dentist in town named Raymond Hansen. And this is what you would call an example of builder architecture. And again, I'm not really an expert on architecture, so I'm not sure what builder architecture represents, but this home is absolutely incredible. And right next door to it is this amazingly cute cottage. You have to check this out. I hope that the camera will be able to capture the brickwork on this home because it's so unusual. I was talking to a lady who lives here in this neighborhood, and what she told me was that when the man built this home, there was a huge pile of bricks that were misshapen. They were surplus bricks, and so he got them at a discount, and he built this home. And so they not only stick out in like this three-dimensional texture, but some of them are facing the wrong way, facing different ways. But anyway, this is known as the Hadley Hyde House. And Hadley Hyde was an optometrist, and he also worked as the treasurer for his family's jewelry business. It was the Frank Hyde Jewelry Company. So yeah, the tree is kind of blocking the view. The bush is obscured a little. This is a really cute cottage. And having shown it to you, we're going to cross back over to the other side of 21st Street and take a look at this house. Now, Helen McKennan was originally from Albany, New York, and she later moved to Wisconsin to marry her husband, Dr. William McKennan. And after his passing, I want to say in 1879, I might be off on the year, but sometime around 1879, he passed away, and her brother encouraged her, her brother Artemis. I love that name. It sounds like a transformer. But her brother Artemis convinced her to move to Sioux Falls because this was a really booming and developing area, and they were both historically involved with real estate development and speculation. And being that this was an area that was booming, he convinced her to move here because she needed to make a fresh start after the passing of her husband. And this was an area where there was a lot of money laying on the table waiting to be made. And so she came to town and began investing in real estate. And that led her to being one of the wealthiest citizens in Sioux Falls at the time. But as she began to approach the end of her life, she began this very philanthropic phase where she really wanted to give back as much as she could to the community. And so at the time of her passing, she left a number of things in her will to this city. And I'll tell you about those in just a moment. But first, I want to show you this house behind me. At 521 East 21st Street is the Thomas Billion House. This is an example of what you would call prairie school architecture, and this home was constructed in 1917, making it one of the oldest homes in this neighborhood. The next home is just a couple of doors down, so I'm going to take a quick walk and I'll see you when we get there. My bad, it wasn't a couple of doors down, it was actually right next door. It's just that the homes in this neighborhood have incredibly huge yards, and so I thought it was farther away than it was. But anyway, this is also the Hadley Hyde House, 515 East 21st Street. And this is what you would call a Spanish eclectic style. It's a little bit obscured by the trees, which gives them lots of privacy. But the interesting thing about this home is that it was constructed by the same man who built the cottage diagonally across the street, the place with the unusual brickwork over there. That was his original home, and then later he built this larger home sort of diagonally across the street and moved into this home. This one was constructed in 1923. Directly next door from the Hyde House is what is known as the William Baker home. This home was constructed in 1916. It's widely regarded as the city's best preserved example of Tudor Revival style architecture. And it was constructed by a man named William Baker, who was the president of the Minnehaha National Bank. So this is where the bank president lived. This is the last home we're going to look at on this little strip here. We're going to walk down to the corner and take a turn on 4th Street and take a look at some of the homes on 4th Street. Just to give you a profile shot of this home as we round the corner, just to give you an idea of the scale. I'm tempted to ask if they'll let me take the swing for a ride, but there's just no time. We've got more houses to see. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and we're going to run out of daylight if we spend too much time at each one. So moving on, right next door is what's known as the Rush Brown House. This house was constructed in 1921 and is an example of Gregorian revival architecture, such as we've already seen on this video. This is just a different example. Very fancy brickwork in this home. And this home was constructed by a man named Rush Brown. who was a druggist wholesaler. So he wouldn't be the actual pharmacist that you would go to get your prescriptions filled. He would be the man that supplied that pharmacist. And I guess that was a very well-paying job in those days, because this is an absolutely beautiful home. Right next door, we can make our way down, is what is known as the Christian Bratrud House. This house was constructed in 1922, and it was originally very colorful. They've since repainted it, but this house was originally known for all of the bright colors. But wow, just look at the vines. I'm not sure what style of home this is, but I do know that it was constructed in 1922, and the vines just give it such an amazing aesthetic. Ooh, I'm blinded by the sun, as I often seem to be in these videos, but I don't want to get so distracted by looking at houses that I forget to tell you the rest about Helen McKennan, because she was an incredible woman. I told you that she left some gifts to this city. One of them was her home in this neighborhood, which unfortunately is no longer here. It had fallen into a state of disrepair, and the city of Sioux Falls demolished that home in the early 1960s. It was a time before Sioux Falls had really gotten its spirit of historical preservation, and they just decided that rather than paying the price of maintaining this property, it would be better to just tear it down. But at her passing in 1906, Helen McKennan left the city, her home in this neighborhood, along with 20 acres of land. And her expressed instructions were that the home could be sold along with just as much land to go with the home as is necessary to finance the development of a park, because at that time Sioux Falls was still a very young city. I think it was even still considered Sioux Falls Township at that point, and it didn't have a city park, and she really felt that the residents of this community should have a park to enjoy, and she wanted to be the one to provide it to them. So upon her passing in 1906, the city went to work getting this done, and the park was officially opened in 1908. But even with that 2-year delay of getting things prepared, it was still the very first park ever in Sioux Falls, and we owe this place to Helen McKennan. Our next few houses are all just door to door right down the street here. So I figure I'll just take a walk down and tell you about each one as we go along. This one is known as the Harry Hansen home, and it was constructed in 1926 by a man named Harry Hansen, who was the manager at Bonded Adjustment Company. And this is known as what you would call arts and crafts style architecture. I like the sound of arts and crafts, but I don't really know what that means. So if you are familiar with architecture and you want to educate me as to the arts and crafts style, I will be more than happy to hear anything that you have to say. Until then, we're just going to walk on down right next door. And this is another prairie school style home. This one was constructed in 1916 by a man named John Bradford, and that's all I really know about this home. I really love the style of architecture, though, just because of the size of the home. And for me, by myself, it would be way too large. But if you're someone with a family and you want a nice big house, this is a nice style to go for. It really is. And then we'll just move on again to the next house. We'll just keep this thing moving. Now, this is another Tudor revival style home. I'm going to really have to research this style of architecture, because this is about the third Tudor revival style home I've seen today on the tour, and they all look incredibly different from each other. So I have to figure out what are the factors that make this a Tudor revival style home. But this one was constructed in 1916 by a man named Henry Harlan. And again, I don't know too much about the home other than that. Look how beautiful it is, and look how many windows there are. Imagine being the maid in a home like this. It's beautiful. I love the blue. I do. For a long time, I used to say the blue was my favorite color. And then we're going to go right on down the street to the very next house. And this home very clearly has some Mediterranean influence, and again, is exceptionally large. And this is the Del Mar Lowe home. It was constructed in 1924. Mr. Lowe was a cashier, if you can believe that, at the Security National Bank. So you tell me, if you're working as a bank teller in 2026, do you think you could afford this home? Because in the 1920s, you could have. This one is not a stop on the tour, and I don't really know anything about this house other than it is incredibly impressive and patriotic. The chimney for the fireplace kind of reminds me of a Gothic look, but this rounded corner kind of reminds me of a Queen Anne. So I'm not sure what type of home style you would call this. If anyone knows, please shout out and let me know. But it just looks so beautiful with the flags I wanted to show you. And something else that I think is really nice about this home is that they have installed a reading library if you would like to leave or borrow a book. And right next to that, they have a container full of dog treats for people who are walking their dogs in the neighborhood. So that's incredibly nice. Shout out to whoever lives in this home. If you should ever see this video, I think that your house is amazingly beautiful, and I'm happy to have an opportunity to show it. Anyway, McKennan Park is just directly across the street from this home. So we are going to transit across the park to the other side and pick things up on 2nd Avenue on the other side of the park. It's been a while since I did a speed walk. Maybe this might be a time to throw one of those in. We'll just see how much time we have. Who am I kidding? This is no time for a speed walk. I've still got to tell you about Helen McKennan's greatest contribution to this city, because as beautiful as this park is, it's not the best thing that she did for this city. Also in her will, in addition to leaving her home and the 20 acres for the creation of McKennan Park, she also left another plot of land nearby, along with an investment of $25,000 to construct a hospital for this city. And it took a few years to construct that hospital, but McKennan Hospital opened in 1911. Which was a state-of-the-art facility at its time. And in fact, it had its very first emergency operation during its inauguration ceremony. The first night that it was opened, they received their first emergency phone call. The ambulance rolled out, brought somebody in, and an appendectomy was performed the very first night that it was opened. But following the opening of McKennan Hospital in 1911, a lot of doctors began moving to this area because this was a state-of-the-art facility and doctors wanted to be able to work here. So doctors began moving in from around the country. And being that this neighborhood was directly adjacent to the hospital, this was where they chose to live. And so that's why this neighborhood really took off from 1915 to 1935, was due to the highly skilled professionals that the hospital brought into this area. Just thought I would quickly show you this bust of what Miss McKennan looked like as we make our way across the park over towards 2nd Avenue. Now, the original McKennan Hospital is no longer there today. It has, over the decades, been redeveloped into a very modern medical campus consisting of many buildings. And you probably don't recognize the name McKennan Hospital either, even if you're from Sioux Falls, because about 25 years ago, they rebranded as the Avera McKennan Hospital. And while the original hospital complex still bears her name as the Avera McKennan Hospital, most of the locations that you see around town just say Avera Medical Group. And so that's the name that people recognize. But if you're in Sioux Falls, there are really two main medical companies or hospital companies to deal with. There is Sanford and there is Avera. And Avera is very large. They represent 300 locations in more than 100 towns across 5 states. And all of that came to be because of Helen McKennan. So the next time you see an Avera medical location, I want you to remember that this lady made all of that possible. At 1613 South 2nd Avenue is what is known as the Balin Dalton House. This is another Georgian architecture home. This one was constructed in 1935. And for the first 4 years, it was inhabited by a man named Henry Balin, who was a buyer and seller in the livestock industry. He lived there for 4 years, and then a man named James Dalton moved into this home. And Mr. Dalton was the owner of the local Coca-Cola bottling plant. Thought I would try it from this angle just to see if we can get a better shot without the sun. Again, Henry Balin lived here for the first 4 years, beginning in 1935. And then this home was lived in from 1939 on by James Dalton, who owned the local Coca-Cola bottling plant. And the next house that I want to show you is just a few doors down. So I'm going to take a quick walk down, and I will be back with you in a flash. I just wanted to add that the trees in this neighborhood are a really nice touch, because in this section of the Midwest, trees are a hard to come by resource. So to have an entire neighborhood that just all the streets are tree lined and a park full of trees and so many trees makes this very beautiful, and it also helps with the temperature. But it's really what attracted people to this area in the first place. But unfortunately, in the early 1960s, I want to say 1961, but I could be wrong with that, the entire region of the country had this plague of Dutch elm disease, which really affected the trees in this neighborhood. So throughout the early 1960s, at least for a couple of years, the sounds of chainsaws were ever present in this neighborhood. And it was a very sad sound, because, as I said, the trees are what really brought people in. They enjoyed having the shade of these trees and the beauty of these trees to look at. And so losing so many trees within just a short window of time was really sad for this neighborhood. But they replanted, and decades later, these trees are still nice and big now, and probably making the neighborhood look a lot more like it did during the original days. The sun is still being difficult with its backlighting, but at 1525 South 2nd Avenue is what is known as the Nat Brown House. And this house was originally constructed in 1915. It's a craftsman bungalow style home. And you can see the Asian influence, or maybe you can't because of the sun. But if you remember back to when we did the Cathedral Historic District, there was also a craftsman style bungalow with very similar Asian themed arches. So it reminds me of that. And this was constructed in 1915 by a man named Henry Finn of Finn Brothers. And Finn Brothers was a local company that made candy and ice cream. And he lived here for about 5 years until the house was bought by a man named, what was his name? Nat Brown. And Nat Brown was a local auto dealer here in town. He sold cars. And the interesting thing about this house is that this style of home was actually inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. And that's what made it so popular across the United States. Directly next door to the Nat Brown House is the Frank Denton House. And this is a Prairie School architecture home that was constructed in 1916 by Frank Denton, who was a traveling salesman, and he sold jewelry. Right next door to him is another Prairie School architecture home. I guess that in the same way that the Queen Anne was the most common home style in the Cathedral Historic District, it seems to be that the Prairie School architecture was the most common style in the McKennan Historic District. And the only thing I really know about this home is that it was constructed in 1920 by a man named Edgar Olson. But I really love, just as with the other home we looked at earlier, I really love the way the vines have been allowed to overtake this and just give it an old historic look. Having to do a low angle to try to block out the sun so you can actually see the home. But this is what is known as the Moore Buchholz home. This is a Tudor revival style home. It was constructed in 1924. The original owner, all I know about him is that his name was Moore, and that he lived here until 1937, at which time the home was purchased by a man named Arm Buchholz, who worked for the local power company. Directly next door from the last home is another Tudor revival style home. This one was constructed in 1920 by a man named Sioux Grigsby, spelled just like the tribe, S-I-O-U-X. And the interesting thing about Sioux Grigsby was that he was the son of Melvin Grigsby, Colonel Grigsby, the man who originally platted this neighborhood in 1883. Sioux built this home in 1920 and lived here his entire life, all the way up to his death in 1976. Okay, so now we're back on 21st Street, the Boulevard, and I could not give a tour of the McKennan Historic District without showing you this home. This is what's known as the Lean Hollister House, and it was constructed in 1885 by a man named Burr Lean, who was the mayor of Sioux Falls from 1898 to 1900. Imagine that, you're mayor for 2 years and you make so much money you can afford to build a house this large. But aside from being the oldest remaining home in this neighborhood, another interesting fact about this home was that the front door was not originally here on 21st Street. As I said, living on the boulevard became something that was highly desirable in this town. And so having your house facing the boulevard became very important. It was like a status symbol to have your address on the boulevard. But at the time this house was constructed, it was originally the front door was on what is now the side of the home on 2nd Avenue where we're just at. And in fact, the original horse hitching post from that side of the building is still there on the 2nd Avenue side today. But at some point later on, the owners decided to remodel and relocate the door to this side facing the boulevard. I don't really know anything about this particular home, but it's here and it's nice looking, so I figured why not show it to you. So directly across the street from that house is what is known as the Claude Thompson home. I don't know very much about this house except that it was constructed in 1922 and it says that it's eclectic style. You would think that eclectic style is an oxymoron, but here you go. If you've ever wanted to know what an eclectic style home looks like, this is it. For the next home, this one is here on the corner of 21st and 1st. So we're going to take just a quick jaunt down 1st Avenue to look at one home, and then we'll come back up to the boulevard. I feel like maybe I should put myself on camera for once. I've been showing you all these homes and telling you about the homes, and I forget when the last time I was on here myself was. So I have nothing to say at this moment except to just switch the angle. Anyway, I'm almost down to the next spot. I'll check with you in just a bit. We've got to get a low angle again because we are being backlit by the sun from this side. And this isn't even the house I came down 1st Avenue to show you, but I saw it and it just looks stunning. I had to capture it on this video. But the house I was actually going to is right next door to this one. I can get beyond the bushes so that you could see it. This was a Mediterranean style home constructed in 1915, and it's known as the Charles Sims home. Obviously, Charles Sims is the man who constructed this home, and Charles Sims owned the local plumbing supply company in town. Sorry, the sun's breaking through. It's breaking through, but we're almost to the shade. Here we go. Now you can maybe see it. So this is a Mediterranean style home constructed in 1915 by the man who owned the local plumbing supply company. Let's go, Charles Sims. So having shown you these two beautiful homes, I'm gonna head right back down to the corner to the boulevard and we will continue on. I got just a couple of places left and then this tour will be wrapped up. I did want to just quickly show you the sidewalk. Most of the streets in this neighborhood have more modern concrete sidewalks. But for several blocks here of 21st Street, they have the original stone sidewalk from the turn of the 20th century, and I think that's kind of cool that they kept it around. Just another quick shot of a home with prairie school home style architecture. By far the most popular style of architecture in this neighborhood, I would say. I don't know much about this particular home other than the fact that it was constructed in 1912 by a man named Edwin Perkins. I don't really know anything about this house either, but even without the flags, this house just says America. It does, but flags put it over the top. It's an absolutely beautiful home, but I'm going to go just a few doors down to the next spot. One advantage I will say that the Cathedral Historic District definitely does have over the McKennan Historic District is that, as you can see behind me, there's just endless homes that I see and I wish I knew something about, even if it's just the style of home and what year it was made. And when we walked through the Cathedral Historic District last month, pretty much every house in the neighborhood had a sign in the front that told you this information and tell you the year it was made, who it was constructed by, and what style of home it is. And this neighborhood is lacking that. And as you can see behind me, it's just like every house is a beautiful home that I really want to know something about. And I don't know if it would be an issue with the homeowners or not, but I really wish that the Historic Society would put similar signs in the front of these homes as they have in the Cathedral Historic District, just to tell a little bit more about these homes, because these houses were built from a different time. They'll never build houses like this again. Ooh, the sun. They'll never build houses like this again, and I'd just like to know a little bit more about them. I mean, look how beautiful this is. This is the last home that we're going to take a look at on today's tour of the McKennan Historic District, and this is known as the Frank Weatherwax House. This is an Italian Renaissance home with very heavy Mediterranean influence that was constructed in 1916 by Frank Weatherwax, who was the owner of Weatherwax Clothing Company. So he sold clothes here in town, and that career allowed him to construct this very beautiful home in an up-and-coming neighborhood. I mean, again, most of these homes are from 1915 to 1935. And so coming in and building a home in 1916 made him an early adopter of this neighborhood. So that about wraps up the McKennan Historic District. I always feel a little bit disjointed when I do these neighborhood videos, because I can go house to house and tell you what I know about each one, which some of them is more than others. But I feel like it makes it, to me, it feels a little bit more disconnected and not so cohesive, and it's hard to tie all that together in a way that has a flow. But at least I did get to tell a little bit of the story of Helen McKennan, because she was such an important figure in this town. And it's amazing that a century later, more than a century after she's passed, her legacy continues on. Half of the people that get health care in this area, not to mention the 5 other states, owe that debt of gratitude to her for making all of that available. And so I'm glad I got to tell a little bit of her story and share that with you. As for the next video, the next video has to come right here to McKennan Park. It does, because this park has a very deep, rich history on its own, aside from the shared history that it has with the neighborhood. And it also happens to be home to the biggest historic mystery I've ever encountered in my life. And so it only makes sense to do the McKennan Park video side by side with the Historic District video. So next video, right back here at McKennan Park. And being that they're so closely tied together, I'm going to try my hardest to do this as just an extra video this week to go up on Saturday, but no promises. I'm going to do my best, and hopefully I'll get it up on Saturday and we'll move on to something else Wednesday. But if I fail to meet that goal, it will definitely be there Wednesday at 1 waiting for you. Either way, the next video, regardless of when it comes out, the next video will be McKennan Park, because there's something in this park that you have to see, and you're going to have the same experience that I did. First, you're going to wonder how you've never heard of this before, and then you're going to wonder what happened. And I hope together we can solve this mystery, but that will be the next one coming out. If you enjoyed today's video, if you enjoyed seeing the homes, or if you learned anything, found it interesting at all, please take a moment to tap the subscribe button down below. It doesn't cost you anything, and it honestly does a lot to help me out. But either way, whether you subscribe or not, I love you all. Thank you so very much for watching. Quackers out.